Officer Bradley thought he had everything under control, until one phone call turned his entire world upside down. The night was unusually quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional flicker of streetlights piercing through the darkness. Darius, a 17-year-old black teenager, walked briskly down the nearly empty street. He had just finished his shift at the local diner where he worked part-time to support his family. His footsteps echoed in the damp air as he pulled his hood tighter around his head to shield himself from the slight drizzle that had begun to fall. Darius was no stranger to walking home late at night. The long hours and late shifts were routine for him, but they always left him feeling uneasy. He wasn't worried about his neighborhood, it was the police who made him nervous. The stories he'd heard, the ones he'd seen on the news, of black boys being harassed for simply existing, weighed heavily on his mind. As he approached a street corner, the unsettling glare of headlights caught his attention. A police cruiser slowed down as it turned the corner, the beams of light illuminating Darius in an almost accusatory way. His heart skipped a beat. He knew this wasn't good. The cop car, instead of passing by, came to a slow halt just a few feet behind him. Darius kept walking, hoping it was a coincidence. Maybe the officer was on patrol. Maybe he was just checking the area. But deep down, Darius knew that wasn't the case. He could feel the weight of the officer's gaze on him. It was a familiar feeling, one he had experienced many times before but had always managed to avoid. Tonight, though, there would be no avoiding it. The police car's siren chirped briefly, and Darius stopped in his tracks. His heart raced as he turned to see the door swing open. Out stepped Officer Bradley, a man in his mid-40s, with a stern look that Darius had come to recognize all too well. He didn't know this officer personally, but he knew the type, someone who saw black boys like him as nothing but trouble. "Hey, stop right there." Officer Bradley's voice cut through the silence, commanding attention and submission. Darius raised his hands slightly, his palms open to show he meant no harm. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his nerves betrayed him. Bradley's eyes narrowed as he approached. "What are you doing out here this late?" "You fit the description of someone we're looking for," the officer said coldly, eyeing Darius's hoodie and backpack with suspicion. "I'm just walking home from work," Darius replied, his voice calm but his heart pounding. He could feel the situation spiraling, and he didn't like where it was headed. But Officer Bradley wasn't listening. He had already made up his mind about Darius. To him, Darius wasn't a hard-working teenager trying to get home. He was a suspect, a potential criminal, someone who didn't belong on these streets at this hour. And tonight, Officer Bradley was determined to teach him a lesson. "I'm going to need you to empty your pockets and show me what's in that bag," the officer demanded, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Darius hesitated, knowing that anything he said or did could be used against him. He wasn't carrying anything illegal, just his uniform, a few tips from the diner, and a couple of textbooks. But he also knew that didn't matter. To Officer Bradley, any excuse would be enough to escalate the situation. "Look, officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to get home," Darius pleaded, but Bradley had already taken out his handcuffs. "You think I care about your story? We'll figure this out at the station," Bradley sneered, stepping closer. And just like that, Darius realized that tonight would be different. Tonight, he wasn't going to make it home without facing the injustice that he had feared for so long. Officer Bradley's eyes were cold, sharp, and calculating as he approached Darius, his hand resting firmly on the baton strapped to his belt. The sound of his boots crunching against the damp pavement echoed ominously, while the rain lightly tapped against the hood of his police car, still idling on the side of the road. The police siren, which had blared briefly moments ago, was now silent, but its weight lingered in the air, a signal that the situation had already escalated. Darius stood frozen, his heart racing in his chest. The feeling of being watched, judged, and targeted by Officer Bradley was unmistakable. This wasn't the first time he had seen those judgmental eyes. He had encountered similar stares before, on buses, in stores, even at school. But this was different. This was a police officer, and no amount of politeness or reason seemed like it could turn the tide in his favor. He was trapped. "Empty your pockets," Officer Bradley barked, his voice sharp and devoid of empathy. Darius's hands shook slightly as he hesitated. He wasn't sure if complying would make things worse or better. He glanced up at the officer, trying to read his expression, but all he saw was authority, a look that said, "I've already made up my mind about you." "I said, empty your pockets," Bradley repeated, this time with more force, his hand tightening around the baton as if daring Darius to resist. Darius swallowed hard. He had nothing to hide, just a phone, a wallet, and a few crumpled bills from his shift at the diner, but the mere act of reaching into his pockets felt dangerous, like any sudden movement might provoke something worse. His instincts told him that no matter what he did, he was already guilty in the officer's eyes. "Officer," Darius began cautiously, his voice trembling slightly, "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to get home." Bradley narrowed his eyes. "That's not what I asked. I asked you to empty your damn pockets. Do it." No. There was no reasoning with him, no room for negotiation. Darius slowly raised his hands, showing that he wasn't reaching for anything dangerous, and carefully began to pull out the contents of his pockets. His phone, a cracked screen from months of overuse, was the first thing he handed over. Then came his wallet, a simple leather one his mother had given him when he got his first job. Lastly, he pulled out a few crumpled dollar bills and receipts, remnants from the diner. Officer Bradley snatched the items from Darius's hands, his eyes scanning them with exaggerated suspicion, as if expecting to find something incriminating. But there was nothing, just the mundane belongings of a teenager trying to get by. "That all you got?" Bradley sneered, tossing the wallet and phone back to Darius without care, letting the wallet hit the wet pavement with a soft thud. Darius bent down to pick it up, his fingers trembling as he stuffed it back into his jacket. He wanted to say something, wanted to ask why he was being treated this way, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Words wouldn't change the cop's mind. Words wouldn't erase the years of ingrained racism that had led to this moment. Just as Darius straightened up, Officer Bradley took a step closer, his presence now uncomfortably close. The smell of wet leather and sweat filled the air between them. "I know your type," Bradley muttered, almost too quietly for Darius to hear. "Think you can walk around here, doing whatever you want, and we're supposed to just let it happen? Not on my watch." Darius's heart sank further. He could feel the bile rise in his throat, a mixture of fear, anger, and frustration. My type? What was that supposed to mean? Was it the hoodie he wore? His skin color? Or simply the fact that he was out late at night, walking home like any other person? "I'm not doing anything wrong," Darius said, his voice firmer this time, though his pulse quickened with the risk of standing up for himself. Bradley's eyes flickered with something dark and dangerous, as if Darius's words were a personal affront. He leaned in even closer, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You think I care about what you say? You think I care about what you think? I've been on this job long enough to know what's going on around here. You're just another punk looking for trouble." Darius clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He felt powerless, but the anger inside him was growing, bubbling just beneath the surface. The injustice of it all, the casual cruelty, the assumption that he was nothing more than a criminal, was too much to bear. "Why are you doing this?" Darius asked, his voice trembling but determined. "I haven't done anything. I'm just trying to get home." Bradley let out a cold laugh, stepping back slightly but still looming over Darius. "But because I can. Because that's what we do. We protect this neighborhood from people like you." Darius's breath hitched. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the blatant racism or the fact that Bradley seemed to believe every word he was saying. Suddenly, without warning, Bradley grabbed Darius by the arm, twisting it behind his back with a force that made Darius wince in pain. The handcuffs snapped around his wrists, the cold metal biting into his skin. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer," Bradley said, his voice flat and indifferent, as if this was just another day on the job. "I didn't resist." Darius protested, struggling against the cuffs, but Bradley only tightened his grip, forcing him toward the police car. "Save it for the judge, kid," Bradley muttered as he shoved Darius into the back seat of the cruiser. Darius sat in the back of the police car, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of the rain pattering against the windows was muffled, and the dim glow of the streetlights flickered through the droplets. He could still feel the cold bite of the handcuffs against his wrists, the metal digging into his skin as he tried to shift his arms into a more comfortable position. But there was no comfort to be found, not in this car, not in this situation, not with Officer Bradley sitting in the driver's seat. Through the partition that separated the back seat from the front, Darius could see the officer casually adjusting the radio, as if arresting a teenage boy for simply walking home was just another routine task. Bradley hummed to himself, his fingers tapping the steering wheel in a relaxed rhythm. It was as if the tension in the air, the fear radiating from Darius, meant nothing to him. Darius leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to collect his thoughts. How had this escalated so quickly? One moment, he had been walking down the street, minding his own business, and the next, he was in the back of a police car, arrested for resisting an officer, a crime he hadn't committed. All he had done was ask why, and for that, he was sitting here, trapped, with no idea what would happen next. "Where are you taking me?" Darius asked, his voice barely above a whisper, the words catching in his throat. Officer Bradley didn't respond at first. He kept his eyes on the road as the car began to pull away from the curb, the sound of the engine cutting through the quiet night. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional pedestrian or passing car, but it felt like the world had closed in around them, shrinking down to the confines of this cruiser. Darius tried again, this time louder. "Where are you taking me?" Bradley glanced at him through the rearview mirror, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Where do you think, kid? You'll get to meet a few more of my friends down there." A cold shiver ran down Darius's spine. He knew what that meant. The holding cell, the questions, the stares. He had seen enough news stories, heard enough stories from friends to know that once you were in the system, it was hard to get out. And he hadn't even done anything wrong. "I didn't resist," Darius said, his voice shaking but firm. "I was just trying to explain." Bradley's smirk faded, replaced by a hardened glare as he cut Darius off. "You people always have something to say. Always a story. Always an excuse." Darius's jaw clenched. "You people," the words hit him like a slap to the face, and a familiar anger began to boil in his chest. He wasn't stupid. He knew what Bradley meant, knew exactly the kind of man he was dealing with. This wasn't about resisting arrest. It wasn't even about whatever fabricated reason Bradley had for stopping him in the first place. It was about something much deeper, something uglier. "Officer, I'm not looking for trouble," Darius said, trying to keep his voice steady, though his pulse raced in his ears. "I just want to go home." Bradley let out a bitter laugh, his eyes flicking back to the road. "Home? You should have thought about that before you decided to act suspicious." Darius's frustration bubbled over. "Suspicious? All I did was walk down the street. Is that suspicious now?" Bradley's hand slammed against the dashboard, and for a split second, Darius thought the officer might actually turn around and hit him. But instead, Bradley gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white with tension. "You think you can talk back to me? You think you're some kind of victim here?" Bradley's voice was low, menacing, dripping with barely concealed rage. "Let me tell you something, kid. I've been on this job for 20 years, and I know exactly what kind of person you are. You walk these streets thinking you're untouchable, that no one's going to stop you. But guess what? I'm stopping you." Darius felt the weight of the words, the simmering hatred behind them. There was no reasoning with Bradley. No matter what he said, no matter how calm or respectful he tried to be, it wouldn't matter. In Bradley's eyes, he was already guilty. Silence filled the car for a moment, heavy and oppressive. Darius could feel the tears prickling at the corners of his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He wouldn't give Bradley the satisfaction. He wouldn't let him see how scared he really was. "Why are you doing this?" Darius asked softly, more to himself than to the officer. "I didn't do anything." Bradley didn't answer. The car turned down a narrow alley, away from the main road, and the lights of the city faded into the distance. The rain continued to fall, the droplets blurring the world outside the windows, making it feel even more claustrophobic. Darius's heart raced faster. Something felt wrong. This wasn't the way to the station. "Where are we going?" Darius asked again, his voice rising with panic. Bradley didn't respond. His eyes were focused on the darkened alley ahead, the streetlights casting long shadows on the wet pavement. The alley was empty, save for a few dumpsters and piles of discarded boxes, and as the car slowed to a crawl, Darius's breath caught in his throat. "This isn't right," Darius muttered, more to himself than to Bradley. "This isn't the station." Bradley parked the car at the far end of the alley, the engine still running, the headlights illuminating the brick wall at the end of the narrow passage. For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain tapped lightly on the roof of the cruiser, the sound a steady, rhythmic reminder of how isolated they were. Then, without warning, Bradley turned in his seat to face Darius. His eyes were cold, unfeeling as he stared at the teenager, sizing him up like prey. "You know," Bradley began, his voice disturbingly calm, "some people just don't learn their lesson. They think they can keep pushing, keep mouthing off, keep acting like the rules don't apply to them. But out here? Out here, there are consequences." Darius's breath quickened. "What are you talking about?" Bradley reached down to his belt, unclipping his baton and tapping it lightly against the dashboard. The metallic clink echoed in the tight space of the car, sending a jolt of fear through Darius's spine. "I'm saying," Bradley continued, his eyes never leaving Darius's, "that sometimes, people like you need a little reminder of who's in charge." Panic surged through Darius. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. His mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but the handcuffs still locked his wrists behind his back, leaving him helpless. He was trapped, with no one around to see or hear what was about to unfold. "Please," Darius stammered, his voice shaking. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong. Just let me go. I swear, I won't tell anyone." Bradley's grin widened, a twisted smile that sent chills down Darius's spine. "Oh, you won't tell anyone, all right?" The officer opened the driver's side door and stepped out into the rain, the sound of the water splashing against the pavement filling the air. For a brief moment, Darius considered trying to make a run for it. Maybe he could kick open the back door and escape before Bradley could react. But with his hands cuffed behind his back, there was no way he'd get far. And even if he did, where would he go? He had no phone, no way to call for help. He was completely alone. Bradley circled around to the passenger side of the car, opening the door and grabbing Darius by the arm. The roughness of his grip sent a sharp pain shooting through Darius's shoulder as he was yanked out of the back seat and into the alley. The rain poured down harder now, soaking Darius's clothes in an instant, the cold seeping into his bones. "Please," Darius begged, struggling to keep his balance as Bradley shoved him against the side of the car. "I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt me." Bradley's smile faded, replaced by a look of utter contempt. "You should have thought about that before you started acting like a smart-ass." Darius's back hit the cold metal of the police car, his hands still bound behind him, and he winced as the impact sent another wave of pain through his body. Bradley loomed over him, the baton still clutched tightly in his hand, and for the first time, Darius truly understood the danger he was in. This wasn't just about a power trip. This was about something much worse. Bradley raised the baton, and Darius braced himself for the impact, his heart pounding in his chest. The fear that had been gnawing at him since the moment Bradley had stopped him on the street was now all-consuming. He was completely at the mercy of a man who seemed to have none. Darius's heart races as he feels the cold metal of the handcuffs glinting in the harsh streetlight. The crowd's energy transforms the charged air into a palpable tension, each heartbeat synchronizing with the rhythmic chants echoing around him. The shouting, "Let him go! Let him go!" reverberates in Darius's mind, a mantra of hope and resistance against the oppressive weight of authority that Officer Bradley embodies. With a surge of adrenaline, Darius stands tall, feeling empowered by the collective outrage surrounding him. As Officer Bradley lunges forward, Darius's instincts kick in. He sidesteps, narrowly avoiding the officer's grasp. The crowd gasps collectively, a wave of astonishment sweeping through them as they witness the confrontation unfold. Darius's pulse quickens. This is no longer just about him. It's about standing up for every person who has faced unjust treatment. The moment crystallizes in his mind. He's not just fighting for his own freedom, but for all those who have been wronged. "Back off," Darius shouts, his voice breaking through the chaos, resonating with determination. The officer stumbles back slightly, caught off guard by the defiance. In this instant, Darius sees a flicker of uncertainty in Officer Bradley's eyes, a glimpse of the doubt that flickers behind the bravado of authority. Enough of this. Officer Bradley barks, reasserting control over the situation. He's frustrated, the anger in his voice tinged with desperation. You're resisting arrest, and I can charge you for that. Now get on the ground. The authoritative command is meant to intimidate, to silence, but it only serves to stoke the flames of Darius's resolve. He knows he has to stand firm. If he falters now, the message of resistance will be lost. The onlookers are silent for a moment, taken aback by the sheer audacity of Darius's stand. The tension stretches thin, as if the world around them has slowed down, focusing entirely on this critical moment. Darius takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of their gaze, and decides to speak. I'm not a criminal. I'm just a man walking home. You have no right to treat me this way. His words ignite a new energy in the crowd, fueling the chants that rise again, louder this time, filling the street with their collective voice. Darius feels emboldened, drawing strength from their solidarity. He locks eyes with a few familiar faces in the crowd, friends, neighbors, and strangers, all united in their support for him. Step back, people. This is police business. Officer Bradley shouts, his tone sharp and defensive. Yet, the crowd isn't deterred. They inch closer, fueled by the injustice unfolding before them. The escalating confrontation has transformed the once quiet street into a battleground, and Darius stands at the center, a symbol of defiance. Darius feels a hand on his shoulder, a gentle but firm grip. It's Officer Jenkins, the younger officer who had previously stayed in the background. Hey man, just calm down. We can talk about this. His voice is low, but there's a sincerity in it that catches Darius off guard. Talk? You want to talk while this guy here is trying to cuff me for no reason? Darius snaps back, frustration spilling over. Officer Jenkins winces but keeps his hand on Darius's shoulder. Just give me a second. Let me handle this, he urges, glancing at Officer Bradley. The tension between the two officers is palpable, the younger officer caught between the principles he knows to be right and the unwritten code of conduct that dictates he should support his colleague. Let's be reasonable here. Officer Jenkins continues, attempting to defuse the situation. Darius watches as Officer Bradley's jaw clenches, the tension thickening as he glances at his partner. Reasonable? Bradley scoffs, his tone dripping with derision. You think he deserves any kind of reason? He's disrespecting me, and that's all that matters. Darius realizes that Officer Bradley is not just angry, he's threatened. His authority is being challenged, and in that moment of vulnerability, Darius sees an opportunity. He takes a step forward, pushing against the fear that threatens to overwhelm him. I'm not afraid of you. This isn't just about me. This is about how you treat people like me every day. The crowd murmurs in agreement, their support intensifying as they begin to chant again, "Justice for Darius. Justice for Darius." The words ring out, a declaration of unity that cannot be ignored. Officer Bradley's face twists in anger, his frustration boiling over. You want justice? You'll get it, when you're in handcuffs. He lunges again, this time more forcefully, and Darius instinctively moves aside, adrenaline coursing through him. The crowd gasps again, a collective intake of breath that fills the silence. The momentary dance between Darius and Officer Bradley sends a shockwave through the crowd, who now feel the tension escalate further. Officer Jenkins watches helplessly as the situation spirals out of control, unsure of how to step in without causing further harm. He glances at the onlookers, gauging their reactions, and senses the boiling point approaching. Back off, Darius. Jenkins pleads, realizing he's caught in a web of conflicting loyalties. But Darius refuses to relent, understanding that this battle is bigger than just a street confrontation. It's about societal change. Suddenly, Darius's resolve wavers as he hears a siren in the distance. The sound grows louder, the flashing lights illuminating the street as backup arrives. Darius's heart sinks, realizing that the odds are shifting against him. He's aware that the arrival of additional officers can only escalate the situation further, potentially leading to violence. As the police car pulls up, a sense of dread fills the air. Officers spill out, their expressions unreadable. Darius can't help but feel like a cornered animal, the weight of their presence pressing down on him. The crowd quiets momentarily, anticipation hanging thick as the newcomers assess the scene. Officer Bradley gestures toward Darius. This guy is resisting arrest. Get him under control. His voice is sharp, and Darius can see the determination in his eyes, a desire to prove his authority even more vehemently now that he has backup. The new officers approach, some looking wary while others appear eager to assert their power. One officer steps forward, eyes narrowing as he sizes up Darius. "What's going on here?" he demands, voice commanding. "Just a misunderstanding," Officer Jenkins interjects quickly. "This guy was just walking home and..." "Misunderstanding?" Officer Bradley interjects, cutting off Jenkins. "He was about to attack me. He's a threat." The words tumble from his lips, a desperate attempt to paint Darius as a criminal in front of the new officers. Darius feels the anger swell within him again, spurred by the blatant lies being told. "You know that's not true. You're lying to protect yourself." His voice is louder now, drawing the attention of everyone around. The second officer, a woman with a stern expression, steps forward, looking between Darius and Bradley. "Calm down, everyone. We're just trying to get to the bottom of this." Darius takes a deep breath, desperate to hold on to his composure. "I'm not the one causing a scene here. I'm simply trying to walk home, and this officer decided to attack me without cause." The crowd begins to murmur again, their support unwavering. Darius feels the energy shift once more. They are on his side. "Let's not escalate this any further," the female officer says, her tone firm yet measured. "We can resolve this peacefully." "Peacefully?" Officer Bradley scoffs, crossing his arms defensively. "You want to let this punk walk away? You have to be kidding me." Darius seizes the moment, realizing he needs to appeal to Officer Jenkins and the new officers. "I'm not a threat to anyone. I'm just a man trying to live my life. The only crime here is how I'm being treated." The crowd rallies behind him, their voices rising once more in unison. "Justice for Darius! Justice for Darius!" The sound reverberates through the street, a chorus that cannot be ignored. As the chant echoes, Officer Jenkins steps closer to Darius. "Listen, I don't want this to go any further. Just cooperate, and we can sort this out without anyone getting hurt." But Darius feels the stakes rising. "Cooperate? You want me to just stand down while this officer attacks me? That's not how this works." The new officers look uncertain, caught in the tension between maintaining order and recognizing the injustice unfolding before them. Darius senses their hesitation and uses it to his advantage. This is a chance to do the right thing. "Stand with me, not against me." At that moment, the crowd erupts in another wave of cheers, invigorating Darius's resolve. The police presence feels less like a force of order and more like an occupying army. Officer Bradley's face darkens as he watches Darius rally the crowd. "You think you can sway them with your words? You're only making it worse for yourself." The tension crackles in the air, and Darius knows he's walking a tightrope. He glances at Officer Jenkins, whose expression reveals a hint of conflict. "You have to see what's happening here. This isn't right. I'm not the criminal, you are." With that, Darius takes another step forward, narrowing the distance between him and Officer Bradley, challenging him to react. The atmosphere shifts again, as the crowd holds its breath, anticipating the next move. "Enough," Officer Jenkins suddenly declares, stepping in between Darius and Bradley. "This is getting out of hand. We need to cool this down." Darius feels a flicker of hope ignite within him as he sees Jenkins standing against Bradley. Perhaps there are allies within the police force after all. "Thank you. Thank you for understanding," he calls out, desperation lacing his voice. "Let's just step back," Jenkins urges, trying to de-escalate the situation. "We can talk this through without anyone getting hurt." Darius nods, relieved that someone is finally seeing the situation for what it is. He doesn't want to be seen as a threat, he wants to be heard, to bring attention to the injustice. But Officer Bradley isn't finished. "This is my scene. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment, Jenkins." "I'm not letting anything cloud my judgment," Jenkins replies, his voice firm. I'm trying to do what's right. We can't just bulldoze over people because of our badges. The tension hangs thick in the air, and Darius watches the exchange with bated breath. The crowd seems to sense the shift, their energy feeding off the possibility of change. Let's work together, not against each other, Officer Jenkins continues, addressing the other officers. We're here to serve and protect, not intimidate. Darius feels a wave of relief wash over him as he realizes that Officer Jenkins is trying to steer the conversation in a better direction. The crowd begins to cheer again, their voices rising in support of this new narrative. But Officer Bradley is unwilling to back down. This is a disrespectful, disorderly conduct, and we cannot let it slide. He looks at Darius, anger burning in his eyes. Darius stands his ground, heart pounding in his chest. Disrespectful? Standing up for myself is not disorderly conduct. It's self-defense against systemic oppression. Enough. Officer Jenkins barks, stepping closer to Bradley, his frustration evident. You need to stop this. We need to assess the situation fairly. Darius watches the dynamic shift as the other officers begin to rally behind Jenkins. It's a small victory, but it feels monumental. Fine, Officer Bradley huffs, visibly frustrated, but he takes a step back, albeit reluctantly. But I'm keeping my eye on this. The atmosphere changes. The urgency fades slightly. The crowd exhales collectively, sensing the momentary reprieve. Darius knows they're not out of danger yet, but this small victory feels significant. Thank you, Darius says, his voice softer now, directed at Officer Jenkins. I just want to go home. We'll sort this out, I promise, Jenkins replies, the sincerity in his eyes apparent. Darius nods, feeling a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this encounter could lead to something more than just a confrontation. It could spark change. The officers begin to speak among themselves, and Darius stands amidst the crowd, feeling the solidarity of his community surrounding him. They may have been fearful, but together they possess the strength to demand change. As the standoff continues, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. The initial tension gives way to a simmering uncertainty as Officer Jenkins and the other officers attempt to mediate. Darius feels a sense of guarded optimism, but he knows that the situation could quickly spiral out of control again. The crowd, initially charged with energy, now hangs on the precipice, waiting for the next development. The new officers begin to question Darius, their eyes darting between him and Officer Bradley. Can you explain what happened here? One asks, his tone neutral, seeking to understand rather than escalate. Darius takes a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. I was simply walking home when this officer accosted me for no reason. I did nothing wrong. His voice carries the weight of truth, fueled by the support of the crowd around him. Officer Jenkins watches intently, sensing the potential for the narrative to shift. And we need to respect that. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly, regardless of the circumstances, he interjects. Fairly? Officer Bradley scoffs again, incredulous. You think he deserves fairness after disrespecting me? Darius feels the anger boiling inside him once more, but he reins it in, focusing on maintaining his composure. This isn't about disrespecting anyone. It's about the systemic issues that allow officers like you to treat people like me this way. The crowd erupts again in cheers, their support reinvigorated. Justice for Darius, they chant, echoing their unity in the face of adversity. Officer Jenkins glances at his partner, trying to gauge the situation. He can sense the growing divide between him and Officer Bradley, a conflict brewing not just within the officers but between their ideals of justice and authority. Let's focus on de-escalating this, Jenkins urges, turning back to Darius. Can we talk somewhere away from the crowd? Darius nods, realizing that this might be the opportunity he needs to make his case heard. Yes, I just want to be heard. As they begin to move away from the crowd, Officer Jenkins steps closer to Darius, lowering his voice. You have to understand, there are good officers out there. We're not all the same. I know that, Darius replies, sincerity in his voice. But that doesn't change the fact that this happens to people like me every day. Believe me, I understand, Jenkins says, his expression earnest. I grew up in a similar environment. I've seen it firsthand. Darius is taken aback by this admission, realizing that there's more to Officer Jenkins than meets the eye. Then why don't you speak up? Why don't you fight against this? Jenkins sighs, glancing back at the other officers, his frustration evident. It's complicated. The system doesn't always allow for that. But I want to change it. I really do. As they reach a quieter spot, Darius takes a moment to gather his thoughts. Look, I just want to go home. I want to live without fear. This needs to change. The other officers have followed them, their expressions uncertain as they listen. We hear you, one of them says, his voice softer now. But we need to figure out a way to handle this without making it worse. Darius feels the weight of their gaze, the power dynamics shifting slightly in his favor. If you truly want to help, then recognize the issues that need to be addressed. We need accountability. Jenkins nods, clearly invested in the conversation. We can work together to start addressing these issues. It's not easy, but it's necessary. The atmosphere remains tense, but there's a flicker of hope. Darius realizes that he might not be alone in this fight after all. The struggle is far from over, but he senses a potential ally in Officer Jenkins. Let's figure out a way to make this right, Darius suggests, his voice filled with determination. But it starts with acknowledging the problem. As they speak, Officer Bradley stands nearby, visibly agitated. This is ridiculous. You're going to let him walk away? After all this? Bradley, calm down, Jenkins replies, exasperation creeping into his tone. We're trying to resolve this without further conflict. Darius watches the exchange, recognizing the challenge facing Jenkins. If you're truly committed to change, then support me. Stand up against the abuse of power. Bradley rolls his eyes, dismissing Darius's plea. You think you can just talk your way out of this? You're making a mistake. Darius stands firm, the crowd's chants still echoing in his mind, a reminder of the strength that lies within unity. No, I'm not making a mistake. I'm taking a stand. Suddenly, Officer Jenkins speaks up, his voice resolute. I support him. We need to listen to what he's saying. The people have a right to feel safe. Darius feels a surge of gratitude toward Jenkins, realizing that his bravery could pave the way for change. Thank you. We can't keep allowing this to happen. The air thickens with tension, and Darius knows that the moment is critical. This is his chance to speak for those who have been silenced, to address the systemic issues plaguing their community. Officer Bradley, Darius says, his voice steady. You need to understand that your actions have consequences. Every time you disrespect someone like me, you reinforce the cycle of hatred. Bradley glares at him, his anger simmering. You think you can teach me about consequences? You're in no position to lecture me. The other officers exchange uncertain glances, caught in the middle of this confrontation. We all have a duty to uphold justice, Officer Jenkins asserts, standing firmly beside Darius. Justice? Bradley scoffs, disbelief etched across his face. This isn't justice. It's chaos. Darius takes a deep breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. No, Officer Bradley. This is not chaos. This is the beginning of change. In that moment, the tension reaches its peak. Darius realizes that the stakes are higher than he ever imagined. The crowd, still murmuring in the background, is now on edge, sensing the gravity of the situation. Let's keep this conversation going, Jenkins urges, trying to defuse the mounting tension. We can't let one confrontation define our community. Darius nods, heart racing. Exactly. We need to address these issues openly, without fear. We need accountability from the police. As the discussion unfolds, Darius can sense the shift in dynamics. The other officers begin to nod along, their expressions slowly changing as they recognize the validity of his claims. Bradley, however, remains unconvinced. You think this is going to change anything? You're wasting your breath. Darius meets his gaze, unyielding. You're the one who's wasting your time. Change is coming, whether you like it or not. Officer Jenkins steps forward, reinforcing the importance of unity. We need to move forward as a team, not divided. Our community deserves better. The murmurs of agreement ripple through the crowd, amplifying the support behind Darius. We're all in this together, he adds, feeling the power of collective action surge through him. The conversation deepens as they discuss the need for better training and community outreach, a vital step toward rebuilding trust between the police and the community. Darius, emboldened by the support around him, raises his voice, channeling the energy of the crowd. We need a platform for our voices, a space where we can express our concerns without fear of retaliation. The officers nod, recognizing the necessity for dialogue. We can facilitate that, one officer suggests. But we need your help to create a constructive environment. The optimism begins to permeate the atmosphere, breaking through the tension. Darius can feel the possibilities unfolding, like a new dawn breaking through the darkness. As they brainstorm ideas for future community engagement, Officer Bradley stands off to the side, his frustration palpable. "This is pointless," he mutters under his breath, arms crossed defiantly. But Officer Jenkins shakes his head, refusing to entertain Bradley's negativity. "No, it's not pointless. This is a step toward change." The camaraderie among the officers begins to solidify, each contributing ideas on how to improve relations with the community. Darius feels a sense of hope for the future, a belief that they can work together to foster understanding. "Let's set up regular meetings, open forums for discussions," Darius proposes, his voice filled with conviction. This isn't just about one encounter. It's about addressing the root causes of distrust. The other officers exchange glances, a new resolve shining in their eyes. "That's a great idea," one says. "We need to build bridges, not walls." Darius nods, encouraged by their willingness to engage. "Together, we can change the narrative. Together, we can build a better future." As the conversation continues, the crowd remains nearby, witnessing the transformation before them. The tension has shifted from conflict to collaboration, a powerful moment in the ongoing struggle for justice. Darius stands firm, grateful for the unexpected allies he has found in Officer Jenkins and the others willing to listen. This confrontation has opened a door, a pathway toward healing, understanding, and progress. As the evening light begins to fade, the realization sinks in. This battle is far from over, but it has sparked a flame of hope that refuses to be extinguished. In that moment, Darius knows they have taken the first step toward changing the world. And with every voice that joins him, the movement grows stronger, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As the officers and Darius continue to engage in dialogue, the crowd begins to disperse slowly, their cheers of support echoing in the distance. This isn't just a moment, it's a movement, a call to action that resonates far beyond this one encounter, setting the stage for a brighter future where justice and equality reign. Darius stands tall, surrounded by newfound allies, feeling the power of unity course through him. The battle may be ongoing, but together, they are ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. In the aftermath of the gathering, where Darius felt a glimmer of hope, the atmosphere in the community was beginning to shift. People were discussing change, the possibility of dialogue, and a newfound determination to address the long-standing issues that had caused rifts between law enforcement and the community. Darius was filled with optimism, believing that real progress was possible. However, just when it seemed that unity was within reach, an unexpected twist began to unfold. Darius received an anonymous tip about a video that had been circulating on social media. The video, recorded by a bystander during the altercation, contained shocking footage that portrayed the events of the confrontation in a light that completely contradicted the narrative he had been trying to build. As Darius watched the video on his phone, his heart sank. In the footage, the crowd appeared hostile, and he was seen engaging aggressively with Officer Bradley. The video had been edited to highlight only the moments that depicted Darius as the instigator, omitting the context of the conversation and the peaceful intentions behind his words. The comments section was filled with anger, with viewers labeling him as a troublemaker and a violent protester. This was a devastating blow to his credibility and the movement he had been trying to foster. Feeling a mix of betrayal and despair, Darius immediately sought out Officer Jenkins. He found him in a nearby diner, discussing the earlier events with a few officers over coffee. Darius burst through the door, anxiety etched across his face. "Jenkins, you need to see this." He thrust his phone into the officer's hands, urging him to watch the video. Officer Jenkins frowned as he watched the footage, his brow furrowing in concern. "This is bad, Darius. Very bad. You're being portrayed as the villain here." Darius felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "I didn't do anything wrong. This is just a distortion of what really happened." Officer Jenkins nodded, understanding the frustration. "I believe you, but this is going to spread like wildfire. We need to get ahead of this narrative before it spirals out of control." Darius paced the diner, his mind racing. "What can we do? People will see this and completely ignore the good we were trying to achieve. It's like everything we worked for is unraveling." "First, we need to gather the truth," Officer Jenkins replied. "If there are other videos or eyewitness accounts, we can use them to counter this narrative. We can't let a single video dictate the story." Darius felt a flicker of determination. "Right. Let's rally the community. If we can get more footage and testimonies, we might stand a chance against this." The two quickly left the diner, rallying the community once more. They urged people to share any footage they might have captured during the earlier events. Slowly, the tide began to turn as more individuals came forward with their recordings. Darius felt a renewed sense of hope as they pieced together a clearer picture of the truth, showcasing the peaceful intentions of their gathering and the underlying issues that had prompted the confrontation. As they worked tirelessly, however, the anonymous tipster behind the original video seemed to have a more sinister motive. Darius learned through conversations in the community that the individual responsible for the distorted video was someone he had once trusted. It was a former friend, Marcus, who had always expressed skepticism about Darius's attempts to bring change. Fueled by jealousy and a misguided sense of loyalty to the status quo, Marcus had deliberately edited the footage to sabotage Darius's efforts. The revelation hit Darius hard. Betrayal stung deeper than the external challenges he faced. Confronting Marcus felt inevitable. Darius had to understand why his former friend would resort to such treachery. One evening, after a long day of community outreach, Darius decided to seek out Marcus. He found him in a bar on the edge of town, surrounded by people who shared his negative views about the movement. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and loud music, but Darius's heart raced with anxiety as he approached Marcus. "Marcus," Darius called, cutting through the noise. The room fell silent, and heads turned to observe the confrontation. "What do you want, Darius?" Marcus replied, his tone dripping with disdain. "I want to understand why you did this," Darius said, trying to maintain his composure. "Why would you betray me like that?" Marcus smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Betrayal? I was just showing the truth, Darius. People need to see how violent and disruptive your little gatherings are." Darius's frustration boiled over. "That's not the truth. You cut out everything that showed we were trying to make a difference. You're only spreading hate." The tension in the room escalated, drawing the attention of onlookers. Marcus shrugged, his expression unfazed. "Maybe it's time for you to wake up. Not everyone wants the change you're pushing. Some people are happy with things as they are." The crowd murmured, sensing the conflict. Darius took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "You're wrong. People want change. They just need to be given a chance to be heard." "And how has that worked out for you so far?" Marcus challenged, his eyes glinting with amusement. Darius paused, reflecting on the difficulties he faced, but he refused to let Marcus's words shake his resolve. "I won't back down. If anything, this just proves how much work we still have to do. You can't silence us." The room erupted in whispers and nods of agreement from some members of the crowd. Darius turned to leave, knowing that he had to refocus his energy on rebuilding the community's support. In the days that followed, Darius, alongside Officer Jenkins, led efforts to spread the truth about the community's intentions and actions. They shared the unedited footage, highlighting the peaceful discussions and the desire for change. Slowly, the narrative began to shift back in their favor. More community members joined the movement, eager to stand against the misinformation that had threatened to undermine their cause. The challenge wasn't just about Darius anymore. It was about every person who believed in justice and equality. With renewed determination, Darius pushed forward, knowing that despite the shocking revelation of betrayal, they were gaining momentum. As they continued to work together, the sense of unity in the community began to grow stronger, fueled by the collective desire for change. Darius understood that while challenges would always arise, the resilience of the human spirit could overcome even the darkest of betrayals. Together, they would forge a path toward justice, ensuring that their voices would no longer be silenced. The journey ahead was still fraught with obstacles, but Darius was ready to face whatever came their way. The movement had transformed from a single confrontation into a powerful testament of solidarity, and with each step forward, they were crafting a new story, one of hope, healing, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As Darius and Marcus's confrontation escalated in the bar, the tension reached a boiling point. Darius, fueled by a mix of anger and determination, felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He knew he had to stand his ground and fight back against the injustice Marcus had inflicted upon him. With each word exchanged, the weight of the moment settled heavily on his shoulders. The bar patrons watched with rapt attention, their faces reflecting a blend of curiosity and anticipation. Darius took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He recalled the pride and purpose that had driven him to create the video in the first place. It was meant to empower, to shine a light on the truth of their experiences, and to advocate for change. Now, standing before Marcus, who had twisted that narrative for his own gain, Darius felt a fierce determination to reclaim his story. "Marcus, you don't understand the impact of what you've done," Darius said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You took something beautiful and turned it into a weapon against me. This isn't just about you and me, it's about the message we're trying to convey." Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms with a smug grin. "Oh, come on, Darius. You think anyone actually cares about your little movement? People want entertainment, drama, and scandal. I just gave them what they wanted." Darius's frustration mounted. He knew that Marcus had always been the type to prioritize popularity over principle. But this time, he wouldn't let Marcus's arrogance go unchecked. "You think it's a joke? You're undermining everything we worked for. You're making it harder for people to believe in what we stand for. This isn't entertainment, this is our lives." As the argument escalated, the atmosphere in the bar shifted. The patrons leaned in closer, some whispering among themselves, while others exchanged knowing glances. Darius felt the weight of their gazes on him, and it spurred him on. He could sense the tension thickening as if the air itself was charged with anticipation. Suddenly, the bar's door swung open, and a police officer stepped inside, scanning the room. Darius's heart raced. He had hoped to avoid any police involvement, especially with the narrative Marcus had spun. But the officer's presence only added to the drama unfolding before the crowd. "Is everything okay here?" the officer asked, stepping forward with an authoritative air. His gaze shifted between Darius and Marcus, assessing the situation. Darius seized the opportunity to voice his concerns. "No, officer, it's not okay. This man has manipulated a video to portray me as a villain, and now it's affecting my life. People are believing the lies he's spreading." Marcus, sensing the shift in power, quickly interjected. "That's not true, officer. This guy is just upset because I revealed the truth about him. He's trying to paint me as the bad guy when he's the one with a shady past." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical of Marcus's claims. Darius could see that the crowd was beginning to shift their support in his favor, their expressions showing empathy for his plight. He took a step closer to the officer, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please, officer, I just want to defend my reputation. I've worked hard to build a community that stands for justice and equality. I can't let him tarnish that with lies." At that moment, a bar patron, a middle-aged woman who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I've seen the video he's talking about. Darius is right. It was edited to make him look bad. I felt it was unfair when I watched it." The officer turned his attention to the woman, intrigued by her testimony. "Can you elaborate on that?" "Sure," she replied, her voice steady. "The original video showed Darius trying to help people, but Marcus edited it to make it seem like he was antagonizing them. It was clearly a manipulation to create drama." Darius's heart swelled with gratitude as more patrons began to chime in, sharing their experiences and opinions on the video. The crowd rallied behind him, their voices growing louder, and the bar atmosphere transformed from one of confrontation to solidarity. Marcus, realizing he was losing control of the situation, shifted uncomfortably. The officer noted the change in the crowd's sentiment and looked back at Darius, who was now brimming with confidence. "Is there any evidence to support your claims?" the officer asked, eyeing Marcus suspiciously. Darius nodded, his mind racing as he remembered his phone. "I have the original footage saved on my phone. It's all there. You can see the truth for yourself." The officer gestured for Darius to show him the video, and he quickly pulled out his phone, scrolling to the original file. With the crowd watching intently, Darius played the video, his heart pounding as he awaited the officer's reaction. As the footage played, the bar fell silent, all eyes glued to the screen. The original video displayed Darius engaging with the community, helping those in need, and advocating for justice. The stark contrast between the edited version and the original left no room for doubt. When the video ended, the officer turned to Marcus, a look of disbelief crossing his face. "You edited this to make him look bad?" Marcus, now visibly sweating, attempted to defend himself. "I was just trying to create interest. People love a good story. I didn't mean any harm." The officer shook his head, clearly unimpressed. "You may have thought this was a harmless prank, but you've jeopardized this man's reputation and credibility. That's serious." As the crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, Darius felt a surge of relief and vindication. The patrons rallied behind him, supporting him in a way he had never anticipated. The bar, once a stage for conflict, had transformed into a space for justice. Marcus, realizing the tide had turned, began to backtrack. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry, Darius. Can we talk this over?" But Darius stood firm, fueled by the support of his friends and the patrons who had witnessed the truth unfold. "There's nothing to discuss. You've shown your true colors, and now the world knows who you really are." The officer stepped closer to Marcus, issuing a warning. "You need to understand the consequences of your actions. This is not a game. I suggest you think carefully about your next steps." With that, the officer turned to Darius, offering a reassuring nod. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll make sure this gets documented. Your voice matters." As the tension in the bar eased, Darius felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. The support from the patrons filled him with renewed hope. He had stood his ground against injustice and reclaimed his narrative. The instant karma that had befallen Marcus was not just about punishment. It was about the power of truth and community standing together. In that moment, Darius realized that the fight was far from over, but he felt emboldened by the support of those around him. With their voices united, they could create change, advocate for justice, and rewrite the narrative that had been twisted against him. As the night wore on, the bar erupted into cheers and applause for Darius. The laughter and chatter resumed, but the atmosphere had transformed. No longer were they simply patrons in a bar. They were a community standing together for what was right. Darius knew that he had won this battle, but the war for justice and truth was just beginning. He left the bar that night with renewed determination, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through Darius's story. As we've seen, standing up against injustice and fighting for truth can be a daunting task, but with courage and community support, anything is possible. Darius faced tremendous challenges, yet he never wavered in his commitment to reclaiming his narrative and advocating for the values he holds dear. His journey is a powerful reminder of the importance of unity and the strength we can find in each other. If you enjoyed this video and resonated with Darius's experience, please take a moment to like and share this video with your friends and family. Your support helps us reach more people and spread awareness about these vital issues. It's a simple yet impactful way to join the movement for justice and equality. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Epic Story Moments, for more compelling stories that inspire and provoke thought. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we upload new content that delves into important social themes and shares the experiences of those who have triumphed over adversity. Together, we can create a community that values storytelling and learning from each other. I also want to hear from you. Have you experienced a moment where you stood up for what's right, or have you witnessed someone else doing so? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories matter, and sharing them can inspire others to take action in their own lives. I'm eager to read your thoughts on Darius's story and how it might relate to your own experiences. And if you enjoyed the twists and turns of this narrative, don't hesitate to let me know which parts impacted you the most. Whether it was Darius's confrontation with Marcus or the moment of instant karma, I'd love to know what stood out for you. Your feedback not only helps me improve but also fuels my passion for creating engaging content that speaks to the heart of our shared human experiences. As we wrap up, remember that each of us has the power to make a difference, no matter how small it may seem. Just like Darius, we can advocate for ourselves and others, challenge injustices, and foster communities that uplift one another. Together, let's continue the conversation about justice and equality, and let's support those who are bravely standing up against adversity. Thank you once again for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments section. Until next time, keep believing in the power of stories and the strength of community. Together, we can change the world one story at a time.